Hey everybody, my name is Adam, and this is my partner DePaul. And in the article that we will be discussing today, it is called Constrained Total Energy Expenditure and the Evolutionary Biology of Energy Balance, and it is by Herman Pontzer. And for our presentation, DePaul will go first, and he will cover concepts that are not yet understood. He will discuss some of the author's main points and significant concepts, and he will then provide the evidence that he will present the evidence that the author presented. And then after that, I will do a conclusion, a recap of the article, and then I will express to you guys some of the take-home points that we got from this article. Thank you. I think that wasn't bad.
Some ideas that were introduced are models of energy expenditure, set point theory, and their significance. Before I begin explaining those significant concepts, I would like to introduce Pontzer's hypothesis. Pontzer hypothesized that a constraint model of total energy expenditure is a reflection of our body's response to current lifestyle demands, and that the constraint model should be seen as a primary representation. So the first point that I'll get into are the models of energy expenditure. One primary model that is assumed to be used commonly is the additive model of total energy expenditure. The additive model here explains that as physical activity demands increase, total energy expenditure will also increase in suit. And there may be an issue with this model because it's not necessarily an explanation of how our bodies adapt to physical demands. Pontzer also put forth his constrained model of total energy expenditure. Now this is what he wanted to support as a reflection of our survival traits. The constraint model explained that as physical activity increases, our total energy expenditure will have to level off at some point. It won't increase in response to physical activity demands as would be seen if you're looking at it through the lens of the additive model. So the constraint model is a sort of a way that it's a way to maintain homeostasis. That's why it may be a better reflection of our adaptations responses. The second point that was put forth was the set point theory. And this is about energy balance. Set point theory explains that a balance has to be maintained by having its factors that are involved has to be adjusted in a way. factors that are involved here are basal metabolic rate, and I would say thermic effective activity. I can include thermic effective meals, but I'll stick to the basal metabolic rate and thermic effective activity here. Because set point theory describes how we attain that energy balance. How is it that total energy expenditure is not increasing, it's leveling off, like it's going in a straight line, if it were on a graph. So here's what it's about. As physical activity demands of our current lifestyles are intensified, one of those factors has to balance or help to balance things off in order to level the TEE, in order to maintain homeostasis. So it was looked into as basal metabolic rate has a change in response to the intensity of the physical activity demands. Basal metabolic rate will actually decrease because this helps to conserve energy. It's a good way for us to appropriate our stores within our body. When energy intakes such as from foods are so low, and you're asking that physical, or the environment is asking that physical activity demands be so much higher than what we're taking in, something has to change in our bodies. Because without a balance, our energy expenditures will skyrocket, and this is what the additive model is putting forth, which isn't so representative, or what Pontzer explains is not as so much representative of how our traits are as mammals, as human beings. We have to reach energy balance at some point. So, set point theory defines the new levels that total energy expenditure is now at, because factors that are involved such as basal metabolic rate and thermic effective activity comes into play here. One has to adjust to the other in order to maintain an energy balance, and this is that set point that was described in this work. The last main point that I would love to share is the importance of this. Why is it significant? Pontzer gave a great example that beforehand, or even in current dire situations where food is so scarce and it's hard to come by, your likelihood of starvation is incredible. Like, you're at a really good chance of dying. So, this isn't really a supposed example, because this is a real life example. For those populations who are suffering from food shortages, and their set point will have to change at some point. Their basal metabolic rate will have to decrease at some point in order to maintain a leveled total energy expenditure. This is a way that we maintain homeostasis, or a sense of well-being that we all need, you know? As energy intake is low and physical activity demands are higher, no, we will not, our bodies according to the constraint model, our bodies will not allow us to use energy in such an inefficient manner, you know? So, the activity of non-vital organs in that current situation will have to lower down a little bit. So BMR, or basal metabolic rate, will lower in response in order to maintain a well-balanced usage of energy throughout the entire body. Such as when physical activity increases, we're using our skeletal muscles. And we need that to move around and collect food and work. As that increases, our basal metabolic rate may have to decrease if our energy intake is not adequate enough. It'll respond to our current environmental or situational conditions. So according to the constraint model, our TEE will level off, and this will help our body survive in difficult times. This is a nice trait that we share. A concept that I had trouble understanding is that of doubly labeled water. Now I know that this study revolved around measuring energy expenditures. Doubly labeled water, such as we can measure energy expenditure through calorimetry or respirometry. Doubly labeled water is just another method of measuring energy expenditures through trace isotopes, or tracing water with isotopes and how the rate at which that passes throughout our body. And all in all, that this explains our internal metabolism when the data is analyzed. So that method, it was just another method of measuring the energy expenditure in this study. Lastly, I would like to talk about evidence that was put forth here. I'll speak about two trials that stuck out to me. A trial on rodents and a trial on humans, us. And how does that relate to the models of energy expenditure? So the first trial, researchers connected a food dispenser to an exercise wheel, and they varied the amount of revolutions it took to release a food pellet. So they varied pH levels and analyzed how rodents' bodies responded to that increase. And for the human trial, sedentary men and women were participated in a 40-week training program for a half marathon. And along those 40 weeks, training intensities increased as well. And researchers looked into how their bodies responded to that increase in physical activity. So here are the results. And let's see its relationship to Pontzer's hypothesis that the constraint model is a better representation of our body's adaptation. Total energy expenditure diminished in rodents who had their PA increased. And total energy expenditure, you guessed it, total energy expenditure leveled off, or, stabilized as PA was increased for those training for the half marathon. So doesn't that seem like there are two similar results? And why is this? Why isn't total energy expenditure increasing in relation to the thermic effect of activity, a factor of our energy balance? Why aren't the two increasing? If I'm working hard, why isn't my total energy expenditure working hard too by skyrocketing? It was noticed that basal metabolic rate had decreased. So we're talking about currently non-vital organs that requires energy. Their activity levels decreased in response in order to maintain energy balance. And I would like to read off some specific evidence or related evidence. Such as increasing PA also led to slower somatic repair, or effects of pregnancy and lactation. Were reduced. There was an association in lower testosterone levels. And all of these were in response to high physical activity environments. So, this ties in hand with Pontzer's hypothesis, a constrained model, a model that describes a sort of energy appropriation in response to current environmental conditions, such as an increased activity level. The constrained model helps to explain how our bodies respond to those situations by managing TEE.
Hey everybody, before I get into my part about the conclusion of the article and the take-home message, I first want to make sure you guys really understand the additive model for total energy expenditure and the constraint model for total energy expenditure. So to help you guys understand that in a simple way, I'm going to draw a graph that was the same one that was in the article, just so you guys have a better understanding of it. So, please bear with me because I'm not an artist. But let me try to explain these for you real quick. So basically this one up top is the additive model. And this one on bottom is the constrained model. And these dotted lines right here, they signify the non-physical activity, metabolic activity rates. So for the top one, it's just a baseline that doesn't change of the non-physical activity, metabolic activity. And I know that sounds complicated, but in more simple terms, basically this just represents the non-physical activity activities that your body does. For example, like your organs have to operate. It almost coincides with the basal metabolic rate, which is just the basic energy that your body needs to just be awake and function normally. And all this up here is from physical activity. So that line right here represents total energy expenditure. So I'll just label it TEE. And then I'll just shade this area right here. That'll be physical activity. And then the dotted line and everything below is the activity that your body has to use for everything else, like your organ function and all that stuff. So in this model, this doesn't change. And thus, if you perform more physical activity, the total energy expenditure will increase. And this will allow you to lose weight. And that's the more traditional model that is used by people today. And the model on the bottom, this is the constrained model that is being argued by the author of this article. And in this model, as you can see, this line is the total energy expenditure. And unlike the TEE at the top, it goes up, but then it plateaus to a flat level. And then the dotted line on the bottom is the non-physical activity, metabolic activity. And it goes like this, and then it tapers down. And basically what this is showing is that even as physical activity increases, in the long run, the total energy expenditure does not increase like the top model, but instead plateaus as your body adapts and tries to keep the TEE within normal homeostatic ranges, right? So let me try to explain this a little more better for you guys. So this, I'll shade it in. This is physical activity. As you can see, hopefully you guys can see it. It goes from little physical activity to bigger physical activity, right? And then on this side, it's bigger non-physical activity, metabolic activity, and then it gets smaller. So basically, these two change based on how much physical activity is being performed, but the total energy expenditure does not change in the long run. The body wants to keep it within that normal range. And to do that, if you perform more physical activity, then the body will cut the amount of energy that it uses on the non-physical activity metabolic rate, such as trying to keep your organs going. So I hope this little talk has helped you understand these two models, because it's really essential to know, especially when we're talking about this article and what the author is discussing. So just to recap some of the things we talked about, the author of this article, Pontzer, proposed an alternative model to the more traditional model of total energy expenditure, which is the additive model. The model proposed by Pontzer is the constrained model, which we just went over a couple minutes ago. The constrained model appears to reflect more accurately the way the body physiologically adapts to the demands of the body and their lifestyle. So if they have more physical activity, then the body will cut down on the other non-physical activity, metabolic activity, such as organ function and all that. And this brings me to why this would happen. The body wants to keep the total energy expenditure within this normal range because it wants to keep the body of the human or the animal intact and in the same fully functioning form, compared to in this model where if total energy expenditure is allowed to keep going, a person or a creature's body could wither. If they need energy, then they'll use all their fat stores and they'll use any muscle they have because they absolutely need to use it to pay for the extra energy they are using. And in this model, it protects the body mass. So this makes a lot more sense because the number one priority of your body is to survive and reproduce. So, in the same context of surviving, the research seems to show that the increase in physical activity and the reduction in the non-physical activity, metabolic activity, protects the body against chronic diseases by reducing inflammation and endocrine responses to pathogens and physical and psychological stressors. And although this sounds like a good thing, it is. If extremely high exercise workloads happen for a long period of time, overall this could hurt a person's health because it causes the non-physical activity, metabolic activity to be lowered for a long period of time, which prevents those organs in the body from repairing and growing in a manner in which it should. And another thing I want to just point out is the total energy expenditure, the TEE, is developed due to environmental constraints, such as the availability or unavailability of food and how much physical activity is being performed to survive. And the last thing I want to talk about in this conclusion before I jump into the take-home message is that the evidence shows that there is a limit, the TRE and within the normal range of what the limit is and what the upper limit is for the TEE, because we know there's a limit, but the research is not there yet of what exactly that limit is. So more research needs to be done, but one day we will know. So the take-home message that we got from this article is that this study conducted by the author made us think and challenge the way that we understand weight loss. And I know we kind of talked about it in class on the first day, how when Dr. Sherwood was asking, how do you lose weight? And some of us were talking about caloric deficit, and that's the traditional method that I know of. But just from the stuff that we read and presented to you guys today, especially with these two models, because the caloric deficit really goes with the additive model, but not with the constraint model, which the research in this article supports, is this. So that really complicates the matter, for sure, because it's no longer just about doing a lot of physical activity in hopes of creating a caloric deficit to lose weight, but there's other factors in play, a more complex issue that is still yet to be fully understood, but more research needs to be done so we could develop more effective ways of losing weight and maintaining weight in a more healthier way. Because currently there was just a study that was put out, we discussed this in class, and somebody will discuss that this article as well, is the study performed on the Biggest Loser participants, how they did all this physical activity and they lost all this weight, but I think it's been 5 or 6 years down the road and they've gained all this weight back. And at first it doesn't make sense, but then they found out that their BMRs were lower than when they first started the program, And that could also be attributed to this, because at first they did a lot of physical activity and they lost a bunch of weight, but in the long run, the body tries to minimize the fluctuations of the total energy expenditure and keep it within normal range. So their body's compensated by reducing the amount of energy that was spent on the non-physical activity energy expended to support the organs and being awake and all the normal functions. So that is the one thing that we really got from this study is how can these models, specifically the constrained one, be used to develop a more effective way of weight loss and to have a better understanding of how the body works and maintains, gains, or loses weight. And thank you guys.